So if you're not a big PowerPoint user, but you're using another tool to create really any kind of content, when I talk about things like color contrast, well, color contrast is color contrast, whether you're on the web or in PowerPoint or any format, any authoring environment. So a lot of the concepts will apply across all of your digital stuff. So we'll talk a little bit. I am going to demonstrate. If you have a laptop and you want to jump into PowerPoint, you can bring up one of your slide decks, and I'll demonstrate, and you can kind of follow along. So we won't spend just a ton of time in the slide deck. It's really just to keep me from overlooking things. This is probably the slide that you could use for reference once I leave. In fact, for some of you who are good with Google, I could leave this with you and you could just go and figure out how to do everything. But these are the concepts that we'll touch on today. This is not an exhaustive list. You know, there is a little bit more to accessible PowerPoint slides than what we'll have time to get into today, but we're going to cover, and depending on the content in your slides, it may be enough. You might be all set. So we'll go and talk about the importance of Slide Master, which basically lets you go in and instead of doing things kind of piecemeal one at a time, if you have a lot of need to have the same slide layouts available, you can go into the Slide Master view and create new slide layouts that you can then make available in your slide deck. So, you know, if you go in and choose a layout, and you have the little list of layouts, which I'll show if you're not familiar with that, you can basically make that list longer and put different slide layouts in there. We'll talk about the reading order on slides, which is really important. How many of you use slides without a visible slide title? So there's not a visible slide title. You might have just a picture. You might have a little bit of content. There is the way that, and I think in previous sessions I talked about kind of the oral tradition that we all have around how to use these authoring tools, whether it's from Office or the web or whatever. There's the way the oral tradition has taught you how to get rid of slide titles, and then there's a way to make it so that they're hidden, but they're still there. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about text equivalents for visuals, color contrast and the way that we use color, links. Those are all the things that are applicable across any authoring tool, any authoring environment. Touch on audio and video a little bit. That's kind of its own talk, honestly, but I will bring it up and we'll talk a bit about it. And then a little bit more about considerations with animation and slide transitions and how speaker notes can help not just you, but anyone who downloads and grabs your slide deck going forward, even if they use an assistive technology, because the speaker notes are actually accessible in the native PowerPoint format. So speaker notes can be a good way to get a lot more of the message across as well. Any questions that you looked at this topic and you came in and you said, I want to ask this guy that, and see if you can answer it.
I wouldn't mind if you really talked about the Slide Master view. I've seen it, but never really used it.
Yeah. That's what I'm going to spend potentially too much time because I love it. Because for me, it's been a big efficiency gain to start using that and to have these slide layouts available. That sure enough, oh, I want to use this again, or I want to use this in another slide deck that's got a totally different design to it, because we do a lot of contract work, and so I have, you know, probably 3 or 4 themes that I use really often, depending on the audience that I present to, plus just kind of the generic able tech that we use.
I have a question. Will the speaker notes, will that substitute for closed captioning?
Let's, yeah, remind me when we get to audio video. Let's get into that a little bit more.
I specifically have 2 visually impaired students, so that's why I'm asking.
The short answer is no,
Okay.
it won't.
Okay.
The big difference is that if you have a video playing and you have actual captions, those are in sync with.
You're describing what's going on.
Yeah, whether it's description or just an audio track that's there, that information comes up in sync with the visuals, which is really, really important. The other tricky part, even with the slide presenter notes being so close in proximity, you're still asking for someone to move their eyes from the video and go down to try to follow along in the notes. And so, and this is true outside of PowerPoint with multimedia, with video in particular in general, having a text transcript next to a video, it doesn't do it. It doesn't meet the letter of the standards that we have, and that's because it's not really a substantially equivalent kind of use, because again, even with that, you're asking someone to read the transcript and then look at the video and then go back to the transcript. So it's a similar train of thought with those speaker notes. Makes sense?
My 2 students cannot look at the video.
Yeah, so with audio description, you're still, The audio description piece needs to be in sync as well. What I don't know is if PowerPoint actually supports that with its embedded player.
I haven't been able to get that worked out yet, so that's what I'm thinking.
The equivalent might be to have it available on YouTube, where I think we'll have to see if YouTube supports that audio description track.
Okay, just a question, thank you.
Yeah, we might Google a little bit when we're done.
Okay.
Honestly, I don't have many people ask about audio description because most people just run away from it like their hair is on fire. No, it's too simple, I can't do it.
I teach media courses.
Yeah, so it's good to know. Anything else? I love when people start with questions. It's what makes my brain start to engage and to just fall into talk mode. Okay, so your friend Slide Master. I advocate that Slide Master is your friend because again, for me at least, and I'm probably just projecting when I say this, I know I am because I said for me at least, I tend to find that I need a new slide layout. The example that I use all the time is, at one point I finally decided I'm going to start trying to use images that are licensed under Creative Commons. And I just want a little text box under those to give the attribution, right? Simple little thing, not a big tweak to the slides, but I didn't want to copy and paste the slide. I didn't want to have to remake that slide every time. So I just went into Slide Master view and edited an existing one and saved that layout, and I have it available now, and I can copy the layout into different slide decks and so on and so forth. One of the great things about Slide Master is that it lets you do something once and then reuse it over and over again, right? So if you pull in a layout that you've created or tweaked in Slide Master and you put it into your slide deck, if you put accessibility work into creating that layout, you don't have to worry about it every time it comes in. You can think about it as a place where you can go, and without creating templates necessarily, you can create and tweak the layouts of the slides. So you can manage the content order, which is really important, and you can then share those changes across the theme, and that's kind of your way to connect a different layout that you create into your different slide themes. So enough talking about it. I'll just go into it here with this slide. There's not just a ton, maybe I'll do it with a picture on the next slide. The slide deck, Misty, I'll probably send it to you and you can send it out to folks who are here. It's really for reference and like I said, to kind of keep me on track. There are some screenshots in here that you can look back on. I've got resources at the end as well that have a lot of information and probably more than what we'll cover today about this exact topic. So Slide Master is up here in the View tab. And so you've got your outline view, which many of you might be familiar with, Slide Sorter, which as the name implies, lets you kind of look at the big picture. So Slide Master over in the Master Views group is what we're going to take a look at. And when I click on this, it changes, but it's still pretty familiar looking. The difference is that what it shows me now are the generic layouts for the slides, right? So I mentioned slide layouts before. Let's say that I have, with this slide, let's say that I want to maybe change the layout. Let's say I want to add another content group here. So I have this chunk of content with this list. Let's say I want to add another one. If I right click on it and select layout, I see all these different layouts. And many of these I've created. All of the themes that you see in PowerPoint, whether you grab them from the web or they're the ones that are built in, they all have multiple layouts, right? So I come in here and I say I want two areas of content. I have this layout that's called to content. I select it and it changes it, right? It moves the title down. It highlights the content at the top and it gives me two content areas. So that's maybe the first tip. Instead of doing all of that manually and inserting a new content placeholder into the slide, look and see what's in the layout first and use the selection of layouts to select a different layout for the slide. This is the efficiency gain that you get from doing this. So the Slide Master view is where you change the layouts. So I'm going to go back into Slide Master, and as I run the mouse over the different slides, it'll show me what the layout is actually called. So in this case, it's called to content. Well, that name is what shows up in the list of layouts, right? When I just changed that one, it was called to content. You notice that the slides all have our little able text down at the lower right. Well, I put that in at this root slide for the whole slide deck. So if I come into any of these down here and I try to select that image, I can't because I put it into all of them by putting it in this root slide. So anything I do here is going to be picked up on throughout the rest of the slide deck. Flip side of that is if I want to get rid of the image and all of them, I can just come in here and delete it, and it goes away. I've run into a couple of challenges where I had to go back and do some tweaks because I put something in here and it didn't work on section headers, for example. So I'll use section header slides if I have a longer deck, especially, and the logo didn't look good, or I might have changed the background color. I've done that to myself before. Changed the background color just of my sections, and it messes up the image that I put in here, which is really just almost like a watermark or something that it's just kind of in the background. Question over here.
This root slide, how does it get in there? Is it automatically placed whenever you have a PowerPoint? Tell me about that thing.
It's going to be there. I mean, if you cut from whole cloth and you just start from a blank slate, you will have this, and then you'll add layouts into the deck under it.
So if I add my first slide, then if I start brand new, I got my first slide, but then I go to master slide view. Really, there's this root slide sitting in there already that I can't see if I'm not in the master view. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and remember that when you're in the master view, you're not dealing with content at all. You're just dealing with the structure and layout of the slides. So that's an important distinction to make because you're not going to see, like the title slides for the deck is this title slide layout, which in this case it's used by one because I just have one title slide for this presentation, but it's based on this master. So basically you have kind of an overarching slide that all of the other layouts inherit from. So that's why I say if I go in here, I think maybe I can just undo that back in. I put the AbleTech logo back in, and this is by design, but on some of the ones where I've got the colors reversed, you see it just disappears, right? So in this case, I would need to come into, well, I'd have to go through more than I'm going to right now to make it work. Because the colors all match, and that's intentional. I want the blues to be consistent, just little stuff so that it's not kind of jarring to see two blues that are really close but not quite the same. So this is a great place to do stuff like that, but you do have to be aware that anything that you do to the slide master, which you can think of really as the root design or the root visible template for the whole slide deck, is going to be in every single slide. So especially if you do change background colors and stuff, you just have to be aware of what that change means for your slides.
So you already have this as the root slide. What if you wanted to change the background for the entire deck?
You would go up here into this, is that editing? See, I should have brought my glasses.
Yeah.
It's Friday and I'm tired, that's my excuse. I'm not.
This was more accessible, you'd be able to read it.
Well, I can't help the resolution. I could go in and change it, but there's no reason for that. I also have assistive technology in the form of glasses, which is great. So you go in and change the colors, and you can do this again kind of one-on-one in individual slide decks. These controls are very much the same. But if you look in Edit Theme, I've got a set of colors up here. And this is where you can come in and select from existing ones or customize. And somewhere in here I should have yeah, so this is my customized color set. And it's available, and I think I've got it saved as AbleTech something. It should have populated. Oh, because it's not, the customized colors that you save are saved on your local machine. So that's why I'm not seeing them. But this is where you come in and change all those colors. So you get a better idea here. You can see that I've got the text for my main slides. The background colors is kind of cream. And you can get really deep into selecting colors. So if you have a background that is lighter or darker, well, you want your link text to stand out from the content in the slides. And the best way to do it is to leave it underlined. But you might want it to stand out a little bit, right? So I have my link text set up still in the same color family. So still very similar to the rest of the blue, but it's a little bit darker. And then a followed link is a tiny bit darker than that. I admit this doesn't abide by the standards as well for color contrast. In this content, I'm not as worried about followed versus not followed links for myself and for the audience because there aren't that many links here. And probably because I was a slacker and didn't do the math. With links, there are a lot of web standards that are somewhat contradictory. So I'll leave that at that. But the short answer is this is where you can come in and customize really all of the colors. And it'll kind of sort of preview it if you make a change. it'll try to show you over on the right-hand side. So I just changed this to an orange, and you can see how it changed this. So it sort of previews it, but it's a little bit tricky to, you just have to get used to what it's actually showing, basically. But it'll show you the heading changes, it'll show you background changes, and it'll show you things like in the links, this is an unfollowed, this is a followed link.
So your view, and then the slide master, and then you can go to edit theme or background, either one.
I went to edit theme and the colors, and you can do the same thing with selecting different fonts.
And back, yeah.
If you are in the slide deck itself, I think that's in the design tab. Let's test my knowledge of where this is. Yeah, so in the design tab, this is just in the regular view, not in the master view. I've got this handy little down arrow over here under variants. And that's where I can get into my same selection, same controls. And remember, when you're in Slide Master, if you make a change, it's going to be for this style of slides, as long as you save it, which is the thing I need to remember to show you, is how to save all these changes once you've made them. But it'll be then available in this particular slide layout from then on. So the other thing that you can do here, I'm going to introduce two concepts at once. I'm going to put this back to the original single content, which I just have as title and content. I talked about reading order, and I'm going to go ahead to this one and see. We'll break reading order, and then we'll put it back together. I don't think I have. Yeah, this one has three areas of content. The three areas on this slide, I've got the slide title down here at the bottom, and then I've got a left content pane and a right content pane. Okay? When you look at it, what is the logical reading order to you all?
Top to down, top to bottom.
So would you read you read these and then you read the title, or because of the layout and the spacing, did you pick up that this is slide
I'm
title and
attracted
then I
to
go
the
into
title at the
content?
bottom first, and then
Yeah,
the upper left.
left to right. Okay. So that's the intended reading order, and if that's not, there's not a right or wrong. And actually, if that's not what you get out of it, I should probably ditch this layout and keep the titles at the top. And I'm fine with that. But the intended reading order that I have with it is that the title across the bottom is the first thing. Then this image, which we'll get to how screen readers can read images, and the text. You can go check that, believe it or not. And you can do this in master view or out of master view. And the place that you do it is from the home tab. Over here on the right-hand side, you have this drawing group, and you have a button that says arrange. It's not, this is kind of buried in PowerPoint. And some of this is because of the way PowerPoint slides have always been constructed. PowerPoint slides are built in layers. So you have the base slide colors and all that kind of stuff that we've defined. And then you have, in this case, a title. You have the left content, you have the right content, and you have the Able Tech logo. Because of the way this slide deck is put together, the Able Tech logo is kind of tucked off to the side on this individual slide. We're not going to see it in the reading order, but we are going to be able to go in and see them. So if I open up if I click on the Arrange button, I go down to Selection Pane. And honestly, if you just write down reading order, Selection Pane, you can go back and Google that and find quick notes that say here's how to do it. So that's going to open up this selection pane on the right-hand side. The other thing to remember with this, other than how to get to it, the reading order goes from bottom to top here. So the way that something like a screen reader or a Braille display will read the slide is actually from the bottom of this list to the top. So what you're looking for, and you can see as I click on Title 1, which is the name of that content placeholder, it highlights it over here in the content of the slide. So visibly, I can tell that's the first thing that unassisted technology is going to read when it gets here. Then I can click on content placeholder, it can label it 3. Sometimes these do get off. If you add content placeholders, you'll sometimes see the reading order off, and you can see kind of seemingly random numbers assigned. Don't worry about the numbers as much as the order in the selection pane, because that's what's really important. So in this case, when I clicked on this one, even though it's 3, it says, hey, it's over here. It's on the left-hand side. So we have one more content placeholder, which sure enough, this is text. So this is in the reading order that I want it to be in, but you need to check. especially if you use a layout or you change a layout and you start adding different placeholders in there, go in and make sure that they're in the correct order, again, from bottom to top. The other place that this is really important, how many of you take your PowerPoint slides, publish them as PDF? Sometimes, yeah. None of them have to be 100% of the time. The reading order that's defined here will go over into the PDF as well. And reading order is just as important in PDF as it is in the PowerPoint slides. And this is something that, again, you can see and you use the same exact control outside of Slide Master View. If you do an ad hoc change to one slide, you say, I'm not going to worry about creating a layout in the master view, I'm just going to change this one. It's still really important to make sure that this reading order comes out okay. Because the way that PowerPoint builds slides, the reason that it shows it this way, you're kind of seeing the order that the slide gets built. So the title is kind of one layer, and then this content placeholder is the second layer. Content placeholder 2 is the third layer. And so that's all really important because then assistive technologies go in and have to deal with those layers. Yes?
Okay, I'm sorry that I'm saying this, but I'm thinking of my faculty and we're all wanting to do things quick and simple and get on to do our next thing. So I'm thinking about PowerPoints that I even make. It's just I have the title, I have the picture, I have text. I'm done. And so when I talk about accessibility to my faculty and want to keep it simple, would it be wrong for me to say, if you just got those 3 elements, it doesn't matter, does it really matter what order they're in? I mean, sometimes it will, but they're not going to, do I need to be teaching them about going to drawing and arranging?
I mean, if you want the students to read it in the intended order, then yeah, I'll frame it that way. That order is important. I mean, in my mind, if I put a slide deck together, even if it's quick, and I've talked to a colleague who says he spends an hour per slide, and I just think, wow, you have an amazing amount of time, my friend. And he has really good talks, but still. Yeah, the intended reading order needs to match what is logically on the slide. This is not, I mean, I'm standing up here yammering about it. This is a quick check. And this is something that'll stay open. So let me jump out of Slide Master real quick.
Seems like if Tabitha, you just have to put the title at the top, it will always be.
Well, and
it depends on the
in terms of efficiency, what I would say is start emphasizing changing things and checking this in the Slide Master view instead of doing ad hoc changes to the slides, right? So instead of just being in a situation where I'm looking around over here and suddenly I'm like, oh, I need to add another chunk. I need to add something. I'm going to go in and add a picture, and we'll use the sample pictures. But I've used most of these. I'm going to put a koala bear. Apropos of nothing, I understand. But this is what the oral tradition tells us, is to come in and we just put this stuff in wherever, right? And in this case, it's the last layer that I've added. It's actually in the right place, reading order. The master view is that I can put a content placeholder wherever I want it. I can save the layout because I'm probably going to use it again. I have yet to create a true one-off layout. I create any new layouts in Slide Master, check the reading order real quick, which really does take that long, and I'm on with my life, and I can reuse that slide later on. So I'm a big advocate for kind of looking at the efficiency gains and doing more from the Slide Master view and saving those layouts instead of doing as much ad hoc.
So that would be the time saver, like.
Yeah, that's
Right, that's what I mean.
That's
where the efficiency
This is where
comes
your
in.
time saver is that you
Right,
set it up and then it's
create
always there.
masters.
You don't have to check it every time because you
Right.
use it when you already
You check that reading order in the Slide Master view, and it's going to stay consistent.
So that would be a good faculty training is when you start a PowerPoint, go here, do this, check this, save it, and that's a good template
Right.
for you to use from now on.
Yeah, and then that layout that you created with whatever randomness you created. I mean, I'm not getting into pedagogy and good instructional design, but if somebody puts 50 content chunks in a slide, from where I sit, as long as they're in the right order, and we've got stuff like color contrast and other accessibility techniques accounted for, y'all can worry about the efficacy of putting 50 things in a slide, right? You can follow up on that. I mean, I think there's a really good case at that point to say it's not usable, therefore it's not accessible either, but you get my point, right? People can stack all kinds of stuff in here, and as long as they use the right techniques to make sure it's accessible, it's at least equally bad, right? If nothing else. And I would say because you're gonna have folks who say, nope, I do a lot of one-off stuff. Well, it's your responsibility as a content creator, because really no one else can do a lot of this. When we put slides together, we know how we intend for the content to go into people's brains. And somebody might be able to figure it out if they're pretty simple slide layouts, but it's going to be very difficult for someone who creates slides to hand it off to someone else and say, well, you tell me how to do this, I can't do it, you fix it, right? That doesn't work because we know how this content should be consumed. So when it comes to the reading order, when it comes to text equivalents for visuals, the responsibility is on those of us that create it. And for once, this is something even in higher ed where I can say us because I have my share of slide decks, good, bad, or indifferent. So I'm right there with everyone in understanding that accessibility often comes down to a lot of efficiency gains, and then you get some content where it slows you down. There's just not a way around it. There are some things where you have to take extra time. But a lot of the tools like Office, if you let Office do more work for you, you do gain a lot of efficiency in being able to reuse stuff later on, especially with PowerPoint. So you might kind of approach it more from that angle. And I don't really know, we were kind of talking about touching on something at least related to this. It depends how effective the comment, it's your responsibility to make it accessible, will be here. You know what I mean? That's campus by campus, often department by department on campuses. But if you can pull it off, that's really the way that I've always viewed it. If we create the content, we have to do as much to make it accessible as we know how. Sure. Good question.
So if those are not in your intended order, how do you?
Mercifully, it's easy. So one of two ways. They've got these little buttons up here where you select this and you can move it up and down in the order there, or you can also click and drag. Okay. So it's super easy to correct.
Yeah.
So I'll get out of this because I mean, this is kind of a longer description of how to do it. But if you're in here and you say, I want to check this, you might be in, let's say I'm in the design tab. So the steps are home tab, arrange button, selection pane, check. So this isn't a long process. I understand it's a bit more. It's not that long of a process. It really isn't. And if someone has 50 content placeholders, again, you've got kind of a different conversation to have about the slide. Maybe that should be a 50 slide deck, or at least 25. But that's all there is to checking it. And a lot of the times it's going to be exactly right. A lot of the time you're not going to have to tweak anything. And if you do, like I said, it's either use the buttons to move them up or down, or just drag the content around. So it's a pretty simple thing to fix. Other questions? Yes.
So I'm thinking about my blind students, and I'm thinking sometimes we put footnotes in that might not be, let's just say it's not relevant.
Mhm.
So can you, when you go to the arranger, can you make it so it doesn't read that?
Where do you put the footnotes? On the slide?
Yeah.
No.
So it's going to read each pane regardless. You can't uncheck
Yeah,
any
I
of
mean, you can, but I don't know why you would hide it from somebody using a screen reader and not from everyone else.
So like when I do audio books, or I take a PDF and I recreate a book using the PDF text. Well, up on the book page, it continually says the name of the book.
Mhm.
And then it might say the page number, and then it might give a little ditty. And it's annoying to hear it over and over. So you're sitting there hearing text, and then the page turns, and now you're up there listening to the chapter name again and the page you're on, and
So that goes back to the PDF.
gets,
You're talking about embedding a PDF?
No, I'm just meant when you look at a book, just a text book.
Yeah.
Up in the margins or in the footnote in the header, there's irrelevant information. I mean, if you're reading, you want to just hear the text. the
Okay,
important
so
text.
I'm with you now, I think. So you have like slide numbers, dates, what kind of
Yeah.
stuff? Okay, so you can tuck that stuff away. If you have Acrobat Pro, it'll even be tucked away in the PDF version. So this goes back to the little AbleTech logo that I put in down here. that basically becomes a background element. And I haven't done this with very much, so I'll probably have to, I would have to go in and mess around a little bit and see what we can tuck away. But a lot of this stuff, and you'll see on mine, so we've got.
Well, you don't have
we've got
to show it,
photo
I just
content.
wanted to know if you could.
Well, and this is a good test. Help me remember that we have this conversation
Okay.
going,
All right.
because we can put stuff in a footer and see.
Okay.
Because in something like a PDF or a Word doc, the footer does get hidden. The footer isn't going to be read by, I think even in Word, I don't think the footer is going to get picked up by a screen reader. Because you're right, it's really redundant and repetitive. And if you're using a screen reader, the page number could even be repetitive until you reference someone to a page, right? But especially with footer information that just repeats the chapter number and name, you're exactly right. Help me remember, and I can play with it and see. If we don't have time this afternoon, we can look. Just shoot me an email or something. Because I don't have a lot of stuff on mine. But I do know that when I turn this into a PDF using the Acrobat plugin, because if you have Acrobat Pro, then you have this little plugin on Office that automatically shows up. And if you create a PDF using that plugin, it'll take stuff like this AbleTech logo that I've tucked in to the root slide, and it hides it. So someone's not having to hear alt text over and over again for it,
Yeah.
which is the exact same thing because it's on every slide. Good questions. Thank you for letting me catch up. It takes me a while. I should probably show you how to save one. I think I did this at a conference recently, and I forgot to show people how to actually save the changes. So I come in here, and I'll show you a couple of things. Most of the time when I create, and this may be somewhat unique to me, when I want a different slide layout, I don't need to start from scratch. There's probably something over here I can use. So just like I talked about the slide with attribution, not even with this one, I'll go in and just make a little change here. I'm going to insert a new placeholder. I insert placeholders as opposed to text boxes. Here's why. Text boxes, and this is true in Word as well. In Office, a text box is not available to assistive technologies. It is an object.
Oh.
In the PDF, it'll show up. So if you publish something as a PDF, the text box will be available. But unless they've changed that in 365, text boxes are a Microsoft-defined object, and I don't know what, if any, screen readers even acknowledge that they're there. They just skip right over them and not even there. So, and this is a change here. I always insert placeholders. You can also insert placeholders instead of text boxes, just slide by slide. And I'll jump back to that in just a second. The placeholder is a different kind of deal. And actually, I usually insert just a content placeholder. And that's what this is. This is a content placeholder where you can put in text, you can put in images, you can put whatever you want into it. So I'm going to come in here and just insert that. And you can actually edit, for example, here, if I'm just doing citations, I don't need all the levels, and I don't need it to be in a list either. So I can actually take it out of list format to just be a citation. I can adjust font sizes, all that kind of good stuff. In this case, you can see where it is in the reading order as well. This one's all wonky, probably because I've used this poor slide before. So I would fix reading order over here as well. Make sure that's the last thing. And that's how I would add a placeholder for any kind of citation that I would make. So we were talking briefly about, and if I'm jumping around too much, please just tell me. But I'm trying to respond to questions as well. Good questions.
How do you save?
Thank you. See, that's why I help keep me focused. So from the slide master view, I have come in here and made whatever changes I want to. If I drop down to save current theme, that's going to save it for me. It'll save it locally to your machine. I haven't found a way, and I haven't Googled to see if there's a quicker way to do this to basically overwrite automatically, because this, when you say save current theme, it puts them all in the same folder. I just let it stay with the default so I don't forget where in the world they are, so that all my themes are in the same place. I give it a name that makes sense for me. So if there's a section of a class that you have a slide layout you want to use, you give the section number. I mean, the naming is totally up to you. It just needs to make sense for you so you can go back and find it later. And then you click on save, and it's like saving any other file, it's just a different kind of file. And so then what that does, well, let's go ahead and save it on here. I'll make it really obvious, so if I don't delete it, that you'll know. You can delete it. I'm gonna save it as Able Tech. I'm gonna close my master view. Now when I go into the design view, so this is the one that's chosen. This is one of my available themes, because I saved it on here. So I can come in and select whatever this wonky green looking one is, and I can put it right back to the Able Tech theme. Changes all the font colors, all the color stuff that I showed you before. It keeps that, it keeps all the layouts that you make. So if I want to come in and change the layout, we should see that long list of layouts, which before wasn't available on this computer, right? It was with my slides, but it wasn't available on this computer because I hadn't saved the theme. Make sense? What questions do you have? Okay.
Are you gonna talk about the pictures that you put in there and how to
Mhm.
tag those?
I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the visual stuff. And these are, I'm going to go ahead and bump this back up to full size. These are admittedly not so great cell phone pictures, but I was at the back of a room at a statewide conference last year sometime. And these were some of the slides that I saw. Whoops, I started all over again. I hit the wrong button. So I counted, I forgot to count, there are like 50 bars here.
Wow.
There's some red and blue.
Yeah. There are actually two colors on there?
There are.
Oh, wow.
That's not just
Wow.
a rumor.
Um,
There are two colors.
Yeah, you kind of
Yeah.
see it.
None of my eyes are adjusting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of like turning the lights off and letting your eyes adjust to see it. So again, it was a cell phone picture, but from the back of the room, I really did see just about that. I couldn't tell the difference, and I certainly couldn't tell what red, there was a little index off to the left-hand side that said what blue and red both mean. Totally meaningless. So there are a couple of things wrong with this. One, well, what's wrong with this?
It's just awful.
You can barely read the
Fair.
access labels.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Yeah.
This kind of comes back to the 50 things on one slide conversation. This is not a very
Yeah.
usable way to represent this data to begin with.
And I wonder why there's performance and communication problems.
No.
Yeah.
Some of you might figure out who it is, and I'm not, yeah, if you do, then you figure it out. From the accessibility perspective, one of the big no-nos is only using color to convey meaning, which we've talked about for those of you who've been in some previous sessions. So how is that done here, knowing now that there's red and blue on there?
Well, those are problematic colors anyway, when you have even traditional, a student who's colorblind, who has colorblind issues.
Mhm.
Not a blind student, but a colorblind student.
Yeah.
And especially
I
with,
get away from red, I don't use red and blue very much.
well, and like the most common forms, red, green, and then blue, yellow, I think.
I have a student with red orange this semester.
But there are a lot of variations, right, in what
Yeah.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
So the idea is that whether it's in graphical presentation like this or in text, I'm not saying not to use color, right? Your takeaway should not be, Rob says, don't use color. You need to use something in addition to color
Bless you.
that also distinguishes different areas. So in this case, well, there's just a lot. Let me see if the next one's gonna get better. Yeah, this is a better example because here we've got up at the top, and it is difficult to see, I understand. But we've got labels for the yellowish, the orangish, the bluish, and the purplish.
Right.
The nice thing is that there are percentages on each one of those, right? So we can see a percentage, but if you can't perceive the differences in color, it's meaningless to have those percentages. You don't know what percentages and what. So this is another issue of only using color to convey really important meaning. So what meaning are they conveying with the color here? You don't have to tell me
It's kind of
exactly.
divided into different categories.
Yeah, the different categories that are in the
Yeah.
key up at the top. There are some color contrast problems here too. The yellow and the white text don't contrast well enough with one another. And I'll show you a tool here in a little bit where you can objectively measure color contrast between a text and a background. Some of you have seen it before. So we've got a few issues with this one in both color contrast and color use. And then I think I've got one more. Well, this is just an example. If you can't perceive the colors here, That's kind of what you got. You got literally shades of gray. So it's very difficult to tell the difference between, on the top, you've got 30% and 8% that look basically the same to me, and then you've got the 46 and 16% that basically look the same as well. So what are some ways that you all might change this to make it so that you can tell if it's all grayed out, if it's all in grayscale? Can you think of anything that you could do to those bar areas? You could put a text label. So it's not alternate text in the sense of kind of hiding text, because this is a visual thing, but you could basically take, I don't know if I brought my little pointy thing or not. No, I didn't. I'll do it the old fashioned way. So you could take and draw basically a line from each one of the zones they put up here to each one of those sections. So you could do that. You could use the text that's there. You'd have to do the same thing on the bottom. Just having consistency there. So that is one way, visually. You think of anything else?
Couldn't you stripe or hash
Yeah.
some of the areas? Yeah.
That's a really common thing to do. And even with bar charts that are a little bit more traditional, that's really common, where, yeah, you'll have a diagonal pattern drawn on one, straight up and down on another, horizontal on another. So again, it's a matter of putting something else visually in addition to the color. So that if someone, and this happens, even if someone can perceive the colors, but you've got to print it in black and white printers, the only thing that's working or something like that, you're doing a lot to make the material a lot easier for people to perceive in a bunch of different contexts. The other example that I see is with different charts and graphs that have line charts, line graphs. That's an example that I've got too, where it's very much the same thing. You can do the text labels on them. You can also just put a marker. You can go into Excel or Word, or I think even in PowerPoint, and have it add markers. And at every data point, it'll put a different shape. And you just select a different shape per line, and you get the same effect. So use the colors, that's fine. Just add something in addition. Otherwise, you'll inevitably have someone that has this experience, and it's basically part of it, an important part of it is pretty meaningless. What questions do y'all have on that front? Yeah, and I do some work with a research group, it's a consortium in, I think, 6 states. And they have, I haven't counted, 50 to 60 lines on a single graph. It's a challenge to come up with a way to make that accessible, because again, there's just a bunch of data there. So it's not always easy to do, but you can typically go in and add some kind of a marker, some kind of a label to try to help distinguish it. There is a point of diminished returns when you have that much data on one plot, but it's at least better to add what you can to it. With STEM content, that's one of the areas, anybody in STEM?
Yep.
It's one of the areas where you can have more work as a result. So you have really complex figures. That's one of the areas I work with this research group on quite a bit, because they'll post experiments in different phases, and they have several things going on at one time. So it's not a matter of just typing up a sentence or two and tucking it in behind the picture and saying, hey, here's our text. It requires usually referring to the narrative, and that's what I usually encourage, is even for different learning styles, it's good to have kind of a description in the narrative of the report. And then you can refer to that in this little hidden piece that we'll talk about here in just a second. Other questions? Let's see, what do I have as the next one? Let's talk a little bit about the photos and images and such. So I've got these screenshots in here, and these are just screenshots for the purposes of illustrating what it is that I talk about as I move through. When you add an image to PowerPoint, to Word, to the web, I've talked about screen readers, and some of y'all, I don't know if you might be familiar with what a screen reader is, but it's a piece of software that sits on a computer, and it reads aloud not just what's on the screen, but it reads some of the structure that's behind the screen. PowerPoint provides a lot of this for you. So for example, the titles on a PowerPoint slide, as long as they're in a title container, a screen reader will let somebody using it know that this is the title for the slide. And I don't honestly know if it announces heading or if it announces title, but it recognizes that this is different content, then reads the text. Gets to an image and it'll say image. Well, then what do you think it reads? Well, it depends. It depends. It's up to us to make sure that it reads something. Some of them will read the file name. And so I've known people that have taken the approach that, well, we're going to make our file names meaningful and try to enforce this really strict file naming convention. Like, well, I mean, that's potentially okay, but you can take one image and put it into different contexts depending on how you use it, right? So my example that I don't think is in this deck, I use it mainly out of state to share a little bit about Oklahoma with folks. I've got a picture of a scissortail flycatcher. Okay, so what's relevant in Oklahoma about the scissortail? It's a bird. So if I write an article up and I'm writing about state symbols and I put this picture in there, then I'm going to type a little bit of text that says scissortail flycatcher, state bird of Oklahoma, because that's really all I'm trying to convey with that image. I can take the exact same image and put on my mythological ornithology hat, because I'm not even a bird watcher casually, and put it in the context of an article about the bird at that level, much more scientific. My text is going to be totally different. My text equivalent will be completely different. So most of the time, maybe the exception of things like logos, where they tend to mean the same thing no matter what context they're in. I mean, there is some symbolic representation, like with Able Tech, that represents Oklahoma Able Tech, just about no matter how we use it, right? But most images have a context. So all that is to set this little piece up. And this is something that you'll do in the content of the slides, because you're not going to add pictures typically to your slide designs, unless it's something like the little watermark Able Tech. So I'm going to add something called alternative text. You can do this in Word, you can do this in the LMS, you can do this on the web, on the wide open web as well. There's something called an alternative text attribute that you want to define. That's what you want the screen reader to pick up on. Screen reading technology looks for that attribute to be defined, and that's what it reads when it hits an image. So to get there, I'm going to right click. I'm going to go down to Format Picture. And I get another little menu. I'll close out Selection menu so we just have less stuff. And then if I mouse over this, you see we have this Size and Properties submenu. I click on that. Buried in there, alt text. I extend that. You want to type your alternative text in this description field. Again, this is the same across Office. Anytime you use an Office tool, this is how you put alternative text in. Generally short, alternative text attribute used to have a hard and fast rule on it for the number of characters that were supported. It doesn't anymore. But there's kind of a point of diminished returns, and there's a point where you probably need that text in a narrative form somewhere else. If it's that complex of an image, you probably need that text available somewhere else. In slides, the images aren't always that complex. You can, if your slide is very complex and you're going to publish it as PowerPoint, you could put your alternative text in the slide notes, okay, because it's available for people, but you run into some of the same stuff. What I would do there is I would still type in the description that my description is in the notes for the slide, to let someone know, if I want to know what this image has in it, I got to go down and read the presenter's notes. So you'd still populate this field to let people know where to go to find that information. Because again, if you have these experiments in different phases, that's a long description. I mean, I've taken all text attributes and copied them and pasted them into Word, and they were like 3 paragraphs long, and they went over a page. It's too long. It really is. That deserves to be somewhere else. In the reports, I'll say, can you put it in an appendix? If you just won't put it in the narrative adjacent to the image, which is probably the best thing, can you at least put it in an appendix? And then the alt attribute just says longer description in appendix, whatever, right? So you still use that to refer someone to where it is. In slide decks, if you're doing a talk at a STEM conference, you might have those really complex images. And so you might run into kind of the same thing, but again, you can use the notes to type that long alt in.
So I'm thinking of my faculty, and I'm thinking of Dr. Young and how we have a meaningful picture, and then it's comparing it to something else. And so the picture says a ton of stuff. So that you're saying that would go into the text. So the professor is going to have to write this big, long thing.
The text equivalent, regardless of where it goes, needs to convey the intended meaning of the image, no matter what that is. And in PowerPoint, this is one of the few media where there's not usually an opportunity to look for that meaning described somewhere else. Like again, in a report in Word or PowerPoint, or in a report in Word or Acrobat, a lot of the times adjacent text describes what's going on, and the image is there to kind of supplement it. Here, that doesn't happen as often.
Right.
I mean, images end up there, and you go through and describe them, but if you're going to publish them after the fact, you need that text equivalent written out.
So what if the picture is just showing a comparison between boys and girls living in Oklahoma City and jobs or something?
You convey the intended meaning of whatever
So you
it is.
just- Okay,
Yeah,
but you don't have to go and explain, well, this is a bar graph, and this is the percentage over here, and this, all the little details.
if you're trying to
of
convey all the
picture.
details, then yeah, you do. The other way to do it though, remember we're talking about a text equivalent. A text equivalent could be the data table itself, which you can stick in the tail. You can basically create an appendix in the slides and refer people to data tables that are tucked in back there, or publish the data tables alongside the slide deck as well.
So here's maybe what I'm trying to say. Like, if I keep thinking that the law says that we have to have, that it's not equal exactly, but I'm thinking when I see a picture on PowerPoint that I want my blind student to see what my visual student is seeing.
Right.
So they're seeing a bar graph and they're seeing these colors on there. So I don't need to tell my professors to type that. It's the meaning behind.
Yeah,
The
the colors, I mean, if the colors are meaningful, then okay, but again, you can take, so let's see, let me go back to one of these.
Is that all making sense?
Yeah, you're not looking for a description necessarily of everything that's up there. But in this case, this one is trying to show, I would want to describe that I've got 2015, and I want to basically take the meaningful text here, which is going to be the label on each one, what each group is, and the percentages with each label. So yeah, you'd want to have that information available in a text form. So yeah, you can type it out. If you have the data set, you can point to the data set.
So if I have a cartoon picture on there that's just cute, making it exciting for a student to look at. Just say cute picture of a dog
Yeah,
running.
so PowerPoint, what you're talking about is something that we call purely decorative, which there's a lot of subjectivity to make sure. Is it purely decorative or does it actually add meaning? That's question number one. If it adds any meaning at all, it needs meaningful text equivalent some way. Let's assume it's purely decorative. PowerPoint doesn't let you click a checkbox and say flag this as decorative and hide it, because that's really the ideal. And on the open web, you can do that. There's a way in most learning management systems and others to flag an image as purely decorative, and screen readers won't read it. They'll just skip right over it. They won't even announce that there's an image there, which is
Okay.
really what we want. PowerPoint won't do that.
Okay,
And I've heard all kinds of suggestions about how to deal with it. You can leave that description blank. Some screen readers might still read the file name. You can just type decorative in there to just let somebody
Okay.
know this
So
doesn't
that's
add any
easy for
meaning. But PowerPoint as an authoring tool doesn't have a way to hide that purely decorative visible content in the same way that a design tool like InDesign might.
I have a question, like in Moodle, like when you're creating an image, it'll ask for the description, or it'll say description not necessary. If we,
That's what I think that.
that's the decorative
What I
thing
believe it does when you say description not necessary, I think it sets the HTML to
to
let a
skip
reader
it.
skip over.
Okay.
But again, just make sure it's actually not meaningful. Because I've seen stuff where people do that, and I ask, well, so, what purpose does this serve? And they say, oh, well, this represents, and they answer the question, and I'm like, that means it's meaningful, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's meaningful if you can rattle off the answer that quickly and put it in a context and describe it, as opposed to, it's just a shiny, pretty thing. So the purely shiny, pretty things, or if you have a divider, and to divide content visibly, if I'm blind, I don't really care visibly if there's a visible divider there. So that's another good example of something that you would just, in Moodle, you would say, no meaning there, I just tuck it away. But PowerPoint won't let you do it, and neither will Word. So that's where, again, I've heard a lot of different advice. There's not a way to get a screen reader to just skip an image. So a lot of times people, I think, do just put decorative or something along those lines in that alt text attribute. What other questions do y'all have? We started at 1?
A little after.
Okay, let's see here.
I'll leave some.
So let's go back up to my main list. I've covered most of everything up here. Oh, hiding slide titles. I will show you this with this very slide. This goes back to the arrange that we used before. Go into the, open up the selection pane again. I'll get rid of my format stuff and show you this. I didn't point this out before, but on the right-hand side of each content placeholder, there's a little eye looking thing. Watch what happens if I click on the eye.
Just
Oh,
like,
it hides it.
just like Moodle. We used to open and close the eyes on there.
Yeah.
Well, and what this does, it hides it visibly, so if I'm doing the presentation, it's not there. But if I come in and I look at the outline view, this is slide number 2, it's still there. I still have that logical heading
Right.
in the outline view, which is still really important, right? Because the slide still has a purpose. It still has kind of a title, even if you don't have it visible up there. There's still some central theme or thesis that you're talking about on the slide. That's the way to hide a slide title, but not just get rid of it completely. You kind of leave people hanging.
Will the screen reader still read it?
Going through this view, yes, going through the outline view, it'll still pick up on that slide title. This is the one thing that you can say they have a little bit of the decorative piece going, but again, it doesn't totally hide it from screen reader users because they can still get the content out of the outline view. I'm going to skip to animation stuff. It's really with presentations, everyone's been to a talk where you've been annoyed by slide transitions, right? I'm not saying don't use slide transitions, but I have seen people get Prezi and just go hog wild. And you can quite literally trigger a seizure in somebody in your audience. And there's no better way to completely hide all of the effort and all the content in your slides than by triggering seizure in someone in the audience.
Yeah.
So, and I can't give you hard and fast, here's how to know when something flashes at too quick of a rate. This is true with animations in the slides. I don't know if you all heard, and this wasn't in PowerPoint, it was actually on Twitter. But a month ago or so, someone sent a flashing animation over Twitter to someone else who they knew going in that person had a seizure disorder.
Oh my God.
So, be careful with your animations as well as your slide transitions. Again, not saying don't use them. They can add, but I think there's a point of diminished returns that's pretty close to where you start when it comes to animations and such in slides. I went to a talk where a guy, about every maybe 5-7 minutes, he had just these little random animations, which were funny for like social media. I think they fit on Facebook or Twitter.
Right.
But they were complete non sequiturs. They had nothing to do with what he was talking about. And they were just to add some levity and keep people interested, he said. And I was just like, this, you got people in the audience who you've completely, their train of thought's over here now. It's not only off the rails that it was on, it's on another set of rails now because you have these little interludes. So just in general, I think it's bad form to have too much of that stuff in there. But there is an accessibility concern for people that have seizure disorders because you can literally trigger one. And then I talked about speaker notes already as being a good place to put additional information, to put descriptive information, other references, you can type that stuff in there. The speaker notes will go over into a PDF as annotations. I'm pretty sure there's just a checkbox that you select. So if you go into the resulting PDF, you'll see a little hot button area, and with the mouse you can get to it. What I don't know is if you can get to that with a keyboard only. So the annotations, what I'm saying is, in the PowerPoint, you can count on the speaker notes being available and accessible to people that use screen readers. It's not 100% in a PDF. So you put all this work in. I'll wrap up and then see if there are any questions. I'll wrap up my part of the spiel. You put all the effort into putting slides together, do all this stuff, and even if you don't have Acrobat, you say, okay, I'm going to convert this to a PDF. The conference I'm speaking at requires it, or that's what I need to distribute it to my students. The traditional way to do it, and this is also true in Word and other Office suite products, the way that the oral tradition has taught us to do this is to go down and select print and select from the printer PDF, which is not here. On mine, it's there by default. I'm kind of happy it's not here. The problem with printing to a PDF is it only sends over the text. So the heading information, the alternative text that you put in, the fact that the bulleted items in each list are actually in a list, all that stuff goes away. Reading order that you've checked goes away if you do print to PDF. You just get all the text, right? Because that's what it sends to the printer. It sends all the text and the pictures, but none of the structure behind the document. So a really easy way to avoid that is to do a save as. And I'll just jump into my spot here. And in this save as file type, just select PDF.
That's what I've always.
Yeah.
That's
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Do any of you have Acrobat Pro? On your machine?
I did.
No.
Okay. So in Acrobat Pro, if you look up at the word ribbon, you've got a tab that says Acrobat Pro. I don't know if it says add-on or what it says up there. When you install Pro, it automatically puts it into the Office suite of products. You select that, there's a little button at the left-hand side that says Create PDF. It does a little bit better job because it's Acrobat doing the conversion instead of Microsoft.
Right.
You still get a pretty accessible result. You get much more accessible than if you do print to PDF, if you do save as. So if you all are already doing that, then you're fine. There's some nitpicky stuff. If you're on Office 2013 or later, there's less nitpicky stuff than there used to be. Office 2010 and earlier, my favorite thing it would do is to take all of the images in a file, and in the accessibility piece of the PDF, where a screen reader goes, it actually goes to a totally different part of the file. All the pictures would be at the beginning, and then the text content comes in under, which was interesting. So they fixed that 2013 and 365 and 2016. The reading order is good. You don't need Acrobat Pro. You don't have kind of a known issue that way. If you're on 2010 or before, you might try to get an upgrade or grab Acrobat Pro and talk about PDF accessibility, which is a little bit different set of weeds to dig through.
Aren't we on 2010 here?
2010. That's what I thought.
So, yeah, it's relatively easy to fix, but you have to have Acrobat Pro and know a little bit about what's going on there. You still end up with a much more accessible result than if you do print to PDF. You still have all that information there. It's just not in the right order. And that's Microsoft just, what they do is they add accessibility into existing features a little bit at a time. And sometimes it doesn't go as smoothly as everyone might like. But by the time they got to 2013 and the newer versions, they had most of that stuff right now.
How do you check the color contrast? Because you alluded to that. Is it
I did.
something
I did.
very quick that you can check?
It is. I don't think it's on this machine. I will show you where to go get it. Good. No, browser. I don't use it. Okay. So TPG. So there is a company. The folks that created this are out of Europe. Hence, yes, the European spelling. Color Contrast Analyzer from the Paciello Group is the name of. This is an accessibility consultancy. This is a free tool that works on Windows or Mac, either way. I don't think they have a mobile version. Let's see.
The mine's just down for Windows or OS.
Security. Yes, I need admin rights. It's just it's a download. It doesn't actually install anything, but you may still need admin rights to get it to run. If IT comes in and does that, make sure they do it so it sticks. What it does is it gives you two little color selectors you can use, two little eyedroppers. And you can select the foreground color and you can select the background color. And it runs the colors that it grabs through the same algorithm that the web standard bearers use to determine color contrast, calculates that, shows it to you, shows you pass or fail. So it's really straightforward, really objective. Again, there's no subjectivity to color contrast with a tool like this. There's not a color contrast checker built into Office yet. That's why I recommend this tool. There's a color contrast check. There are all kinds of tests, color contrast checkers for the web. You may be able to run those on a file that you open in the browser, but even with the PDF, I don't think they can get into it. They're still web-based tools, but this will work on any file type, anything you can open on your computer. You can use this to check the color contrast with. And it's nice because you can check color contrast and images. If you have text and an image, this doesn't care. You can get in and select, and you can literally select 1 pixel and the pixel right next to it, which is that's more nitpicky than what I do when I do testing. I aim for like the center of the text and then the most kind of highest contrast adjacent color to it. So,
And that's just, I'm sorry.
no, you're fine.
And that, when I think of color, I know what you're saying. I don't want two colors that are very similar because it's hard for people to read. But when we talk about accessibility in law, they want a very distinct color difference.
Pretty distinct, and it depends. There's some dependencies in there about what the contrast ratio needs to be, depending on font size and stuff. We can kind of talk about that in more detail. Short answer, might be meaningful, but it's brief. For regular text, this is how the web standards folks phrase it, regular text. They don't tell us what size that is. 4.5 to 1 is the minimum contrast ratio. For large text, which again isn't really well defined in the pure standards, it's 3 to 1. So it can be a little bit lower if it's like an 18-point font, or if it's, I think, 14 bold is what they give in their supplemental documentation. So again, this is stuff you can test objectively, and there are all kinds of other contrast checking tools out there for the web and other kinds of content that work really well. I like this one just because it's really small. It's not a big old piece of software, and you can run it on anything. You're welcome. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very helpful, very helpful.